Against a former Holyoke City councilor. They say they've seen the photos and videos allegedly showing him in Russia and Ukraine. Good Wednesday evening. Welcome to Western Mass News at 10. I'm Chris Pisano. Although they can't verify the authenticity of those videos, they are looking to move the case forward. Western Mass News reporter Maria Wilson is live for us in studio tonight with what local experts are saying about this case. Maria.
Well, Chris, we spoke with one local criminal defense attorney who says he's seen plenty of defendants try to outrun their charges, but he says that if this allegation is true about Wilmer Pollo Mota, he's never seen a case quite like this.
A defendant on the run. Just days before he was set to stand trial on child pornography charges, former Holyoke City Councilor Wilmer Pollo Mota fled the country, violating court orders. The Attorney General's office in Rhode Island says the 28-year-old boarded a flight to Turkey back in January. His whereabouts are still unknown. But it wasn't long before a video on social media surfaced, leaving many questioning if the unidentified man was the former Holyoke City Councilor.
We need to support Russia. We have to have friendship. We have to make sure that all the goals laid out are fulfilled.
The video, which racked up thousands of views and likes, involves a blurred person in a combat uniform. That person reportedly shown planting an American flag in a Ukrainian city. The Instagram post says the clip's authenticity is unconfirmed. While also unconfirmed, a check of Pollo Mota's Facebook page states he's now living in Moscow and works at the Ministry of Defense of the Russian Federation. The Attorney General's office addressing the post in their latest motion, saying while the state cannot verify the authenticity of the videos and photographs, if they are accurate, the defendant is well beyond the jurisdiction of this court. And if false, the defendant is engaged in an elaborate ruse to conceal his whereabouts.
When there's already an ongoing criminal case, if a person takes off, flees the jurisdiction, who's the defendant, the case can go forward without him.
But for right now, Rhode Island prosecutors are asking a judge to take a sworn deposition from the minor witness in the case. According to local criminal defense attorney Joseph Pacala, it's fairly common for a defendant to try to outrun their legal woes. But if true, he says this is an extreme example.
People all the time will attempt to flee to China or various jurisdictions where they know there's no treaty for extradition. It takes a certain kind of person with a certain stomach for risk to try to pull something like this off.
According to that motion, prosecutors are hoping that a judge will take the witness's deposition just in case she's unavailable when the matter does eventually go to trial, saying it's necessary to, quote, prevent a failure of justice. Pollo Mota also faces obstruction, forgery, and counterfeiting charges. He has pleaded not guilty. Reporting live in studio, Maria Wilson, Western Mass News.
Thank you.